Hi folks, and welcome back to Fishing with Den. This is another video in the fishing lessons series, and this one is about how to fish the Waggler Float on a still water. I'm back on Den's pond today, and as you can see it's about, 300 meters from one side to the other, and I'm going to be fishing at about 20 meters out. I already know what the depth is. It's about 3.5 feet, which is just over a meter. And the only other thing we need to know is the wind. Now, today in actual fact the wind's starting to get up quite a bit, so that does have a bearing on the type of float we're going to choose. So with regard to the float size then and the float weight, you have to choose it based on what I've just explained to you. That's how far out you're going to fish, how deep you need to fish to be on the bottom, and also what the wind conditions are like. Now the depth of the water is probably going to remain the same throughout, obviously. The distance out you fish can change, but you're going to start off in one particular place. But the wind conditions can change dramatically. Now when I started this morning, this place was it was flat. I've had to change my float to a slightly larger one, but of course bear in mind that it's only 3 feet deep or a metre deep here, so you wouldn't want to choose something like this, which is over 30 centimetres long. If you think about it, there's only another 60 centimetres or 2 feet between the base of this and the bottom of the pond. If this hits the water and goes in, so let's say it goes in 30 centimetres or a foot, you've only got a foot of water left, and that's where the fish are. So you could quite easily be prodding fish with this thing, and that's just no good to you whatsoever. On the other hand, you also wouldn't want to use something this big. Yes, it might be fine for a 3 feet deep water in some circumstances, but not when it's windy like this. So today I'm fishing with this float, which is one of Den's specials. I've changed the tip. I started with a red one, but that didn't do so well in the light conditions, so I've changed it to a black and yellow one, and I can see that perfectly now. This one's loaded at the bottom, which saves me having to put too much shot on, and I've also got a slightly more sophisticated attachment on the bottom to hold the thing on. Because of that, I've only got a smaller amount of shot. I don't need that 75% of the shot there now, because it's also here. But I have got the usual dropper shots, going down to a 14 hook and a single piece of sweet corn. Now I have been using 2 bits of sweet corn, but I've been catching fairly small fish, and I'm finding that a single piece of sweet corn helps me more. The next thing we have to cover is casting. I've chosen that telegraph pole over on the far bank there as a marker, so that gives me the direction. Distance wise, you just have to judge it. That comes with experience, and you will learn that, folks. Okay, casting out then. Cast out to where you want to go, hits the water. Now at this point in time the wind is blowing quite rapidly this way, so I've created a bow in the line. If I left that, the float would be dragging across at a rate of knots, and that would be dragging the bait, of course, and that just means that you wouldn't get a bite. So you have to sink the line, and to show you that I'll have to recast because the line created that huge bow. Cast out, float hits the water, sink the rod tip directly, don't allow the bow to form, so you need to be quick on that. Sink the rod down and give it a good like that. That pulls the line tight and cuts it under the surface, and that means that you've sunk your line and it's no longer going to be affected by the surface drift. Now, just talking about surface drift, the wind is blowing that way, and that's probably the top sort of that much or so of this water that's going that way. Underneath it could well be forming an undertow, which could be going that way. So don't worry if the wind's going that way and your float's going that way. That's actually quite a good thing. It means you're picking up the undertow, which is the direction that the water is going when it's down at the bottom with the fish. And that's been in for a minute or so, and it's hardly moved. So that's good. I wanted it to be on the bottom and to be fairly static. Doesn't hurt to have a slightly moving bait, but it has to be moving naturally with the current, not against the current. So as you saw when I cast out, the float stayed in position once I'd sank the line, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So as far as the undertow goes, at the start I plumbed the depth, and if you don't know how to do that, I do have another video on my channel which talks about exactly how you plumb the depth to find the bottom of the water. So I found the exact depth, and that meant that the hook was just sitting on the bottom like that. But what I've done is I've pushed the float another 6 inches up, so now I've got all of that on the bottom. And what that means is this is dragging along the bottom and it's slowing the float down. If it's not enough and there's too much undertow, what you do is go, say, another 6 inches deeper, so you're fishing a foot over depth, and you drag more line on the bottom and potentially bring one of these shots down to about here, so you're dragging 2 shots along the bottom now. And you can do that for maybe a third one, but then after that you might want to consider trying something else if the wind's really strong and the undertow's just too much to cope with. So now you've got your bait out there, it's sitting quite nicely, it's not moving and it's acting naturally. The next thing you have to consider is how to feed the area. All I do is I get a pinch of bait, in this case sweet corn, and if your country allows it, then feed it with a catapult, a bait catapult, just all around your float, but keep it in the same place as far as possible. You want to be baiting an area as opposed to all over the place. If you aren't allowed to use a catapult, then you're either going to have to throw it by hand, and if you can't get the distance, then what you need to do there is make up some ground bait, or different countries call it burley or chum. There is a video on the channel again that shows you how to go about that, and what you would do is make up a ball of that, put some of your sweet corn and some pellets into it and throw that out. Something like a golf ball size would be quite adequate. Now, as I said at the start of this segment, feeding is an art form really. Little and often is a good way to feed whilst you're learning. As you get more experience, you'll understand how the fish are reacting, and then you'll either feed more often, less. It really depends on the day and on how the fish are feeding. Well, if you get it right, you catch fish. Unfortunately, this is an eel, and I've never caught an eel on Den's Pond before, but that was on a piece of sweet corn, which I've also never done before. And I hate the slimy, horrible things. Yak. If you get it right, the float goes under and you end up catching a fish. There we go. Not huge, but just to show you that I can do it. There we are. Well folks, I hope that video demystified some of the ins and outs of fishing with a waggler. Obviously a single video is never going to be enough to cover everything, but as I say, hopefully this covers the basics for you and it'll give you the means to catch more fish. And in the end, that's what it's all about. See you next time then. Bye for now.